Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, May 27th, 2025. Starting off in the Eastern Pacific, actually, we now have Invest Area 90E. So E for Eastern Pacific, and we now have an Invest, which is pretty much an area of investigation. It's kind of like the designation we give to tropical cyclones, but we give them to areas of interest, or the National Hurricane Center does, to kind of run models and get specific dynamics on any areas of interest that we might have confidence in potentially developing further. And it's very, very likely, it's almost certain at this point, that Invest 90E will go on to develop further and probably become a tropical depression and likely tropical storm Alvin within the next day. The formation chances by the National Hurricane Center from the 2 p.m. update, or in the Pacific time, it's 11 a.m. that this was updated. This has, according to the National Hurricane Center, a near 100% chance of formation within the next 48 hours and the next week. So, pretty much, this is almost certain that this will form and likely once again become our first named storm of the hurricane season, at least for the Eastern Pacific. Here's a satellite shot of 90E right now. You could see definitely on its way to becoming a tropical storm or a tropical cyclone of some sort. You could see that there is broad turning, not necessarily a defined low level center yet, but it is getting its act together. Convection does need to become probably a little bit more organized. But one thing that is very interesting to me is you can already see within the storm on the outskirts, you could see all these clouds fanning away from the thunderstorms that are coming up within the storm. You can see here indicative of nice outflow that this storm has. So this is not being sheared apart. This has ventilation, and overall things are healthy for it. And because of it, it's likely, once again, probably very certain at this point, that it'll go on to develop and become a tropical system. Here's the 850 millibar vorticity map, and you can see I brought this map up yesterday. It kind of was not so organized, a little bit stretched out, and vorticity was weaker today. Look at how much more defined the vorticity has gotten. Still has a little bit of consolidating left to do, but it's definitely bundling the energy. This is definitely a sign you look at in a developing tropical system. And once again, it is likely to do that here within the next day or so. And also with the upper level winds, I kind of hate how this map is cropped because 90E is all the way down here on the bottom right. But with the upper level winds, once again, you could see winds fanning up and away from the storm at the upper levels, once again, meaning outflow. So the storm is being able to breathe. It doesn't have strong wind shear cutting across it, not allowing for thunderstorms to consolidate around the center. So all systems a go for 90E to develop. And sea surface temperatures, too, are also very warm, at least off the southern coast of Mexico. But it will run into some trouble once it moves further to the west-northwest, which it will, and probably away from the Mexican coastline. But I'll show you the models in a little bit, especially if you're near the Baja area and maybe the central northern Mexican coast. You might still want to keep an eye on it. We're not looking at, a huge storm potentially, but there still might be some impacts, and 90E could potentially get close. But not worried about this being a strong storm, because look, as you get further north and west and away from the Mexican coastline, water temperatures significantly cool off and drop off, especially near the Baja. So this only has a short window of opportunity within the next few days to intensify. And you could even see it on the model guidance. Probably only going to be a tropical storm. The model guidance yesterday had it potentially becoming a hurricane, and even a lot of the models were kind of aggressive on 90E. They kind of dropped off a little bit today, but they still generally expect it to become maybe a moderate to strong tropical storm. A few models still having this become a hurricane, but you could see it doesn't last long. Already by, what is this, 60 to 72 hours, most of the models begin to rapidly weaken it, because once again, as it moves west northwestward, it's going to start getting into much more of these colder sea surface temperatures, and because of that, Obviously, hurricanes and tropical cyclones need warm sea surface temperatures because that is the fuel. That's what fuels these tropical storms to intensify. Once you cut off that heat source, they disintegrate. And you can see here with the track west northwestward, moves west northwestward, and then a lot of the models are starting to. Before it was just the GFS doing it, but now it looks like all the models are kind of eventually taking this on a more northerly trajectory, and then by hour 120 does kind of start to approach maybe portions of the north central Mexican coast and near the Baja. But let's really quickly go back to the intensity chart. Where are all the models by the time we get to hour 120 on the intensity? Pretty much either at best a low end tropical storm to probably already a completely disintegrated system. So maybe those in the Baja and the north central Mexican coast might need to watch. I'll show you here actually right now with the GFS. Let's really quickly move it out into time. You can see within the next 18 to 24 hours, it develops, and then on a west-northwestward trajectory for the next 2 or 3 days, and then kind of takes this northward turn into the central Mexican coast. I believe this is north of Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. Not necessarily familiar with the region, but it does make landfall somewhere in here. I guess, once again, I said north of Puerto Vallarta. The GFS is the only model that's really this aggressive, and pretty much right around hour 90 to hour 96, they have, I would pretty much say, a weakening hurricane making landfall in the north central Mexican coast. But they're the only model showing this. But it's interesting. We'll have to see. Potentially, there might be some impacts to Mexico, although not very significant. And then eventually this does move away, and then by hour 120, nothing else in the Eastern Pacific. And then I'll really quickly show you the Euro. This is the 6E run. And the Euro develops this as well within the next 42 hours. It take a little bit slower than the GFS, although that doesn't really matter to me. And then eventually does move west northwestward, but it gets into those cooler waters, fizzles out, and barely even makes it to the Baja Peninsula. So you could definitely see the GFS is kind of on a league of its own with doing whatever it does to the northern central Mexican coastline here in the Baja. Although, once again, this does get close to the Baja. This does generally get close to Mexico, close enough, I should be saying, that you still might want to keep your interest on it for potential, rain and inconvenience and winds and especially rip currents. But in terms of an actual full-blown hurricane that's big, beastful, or it's beastly and damaging, trying to find the best way to explain it. Bottom line is we're not going to have a big hurricane out of this, and I think that is probably the biggest relief if you're at all concerned about this storm. But once again, you might want to keep an eye out on 90E, but likely to develop and become our first name system in the Eastern Pacific. The first name on the list for this year being Alvin. And then beyond that, looks like we're going to have to watch the Eastern Pacific a little bit longer. This came out today, and a lot of people are talking about it on Twitter. Week 2 in the Eastern Pacific. This is the Global Tropical Hazards map from the Climate Prediction Center. The tropical cyclone probability remains, so likely all the way up through the end of the month into the early part of next month, we're going to have to watch the tropics. At least that's what the Climate Prediction Center says. Favorable conditions remains. The MJO is going to be moving through. We talked about this for a few weeks now, that conditions general within the Western Hemisphere, especially right near Central America, including the Eastern Pacific and the Caribbean, and potentially the Gulf of Mexico too, we're going to become more favorable. And speaking of that, look at that. Week 3, this is June 11th to June 17th. You even see a little bit of shadings encompassing portions of the Caribbean and Gulf begin to appear. So bottom line, we're going to have to watch the tropics as we continue over the next several weeks heading into June. And obviously, now that conditions are favorable, we're starting to see that manifest with 90E in the Pacific. We might see it manifest with other storms in the Eastern Pacific too. And we might see it soon manifest in the Atlantic as well. There's lots of talk that as we head into the first half of June, we might get something to develop out of the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, which is not too unexpected because climatology tends to favor those areas this time of year as well as the Eastern Pacific. And as a result, we have 90E. So we'll continue to watch the tropics over the next several weeks, especially we're at the end of May. We're now getting into June, and all of the activity we have right now pretty much on cue. So I'm going to return tomorrow with another tropical weather video with 90E, or I would assume by tomorrow, very likely will probably be a tropical depression. Once again, if you're in Mexico, watch this storm with a cautious eye, not, get your hurricane plan. Well, obviously, yes, get your hurricane plan ready, but don't start panicking like this is going to be a big hurricane coming towards you, because it's not. But obviously, as always, keep a watchful eye to the tropics. That's going to be it for today's video, though. Hope you enjoyed it. If you found this video informative, I would really appreciate it if you like, comment your thoughts, and especially subscribe and share this video as well for any family and friends that might be interested in this information, or you think might want this information. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. We'll talk again tomorrow.